Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. Today we are revisited by a guest that was on a couple of years ago. The team at Loop AI continues to transform their delivery product to help restaurants continue to make more money as well as drive top line sales and reduce cost. Their founder shares his vision and really how he started working in the ERP world, understanding accounting. He also runs a restaurant. And so he has seen both sides of it and understands what a game changer delivery, a third party delivery can be, or where if you don't manage it, it could really hurt your business. If you don't know me, my name is Jeremy Julian. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for CBS North Star. We wrote the North Star point of sale solution for multi-units. Please check us out at cbsnorthstar.com. And now on to the episode. Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I love to thank everyone for joining us. As I like to say every time that we get on the air, you guys have got lots of choices, so thanks for hanging out. Today, I am joined by a second-time guest, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about what he has founded. Anand, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are before we jump into kind of Loop and what Loop is for those that missed the first show, and then we can dig into kind of how you got here and all of the cool stuff that's been going on. But give us a little background, because I love listening to founder stories, and you and I have gotten to know each other over the last couple of years. It's been fun. Introduce yourself to our listeners out there.
Absolutely, Jeremy. Thanks for having me back. I keep running into you and a bunch of other guests of your podcast on trade show floors, and think back to these conversations fondly. So it's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for this opportunity. So super quick founding story. I started my career building out ERP systems for Flipkart back in the day. This was in 2012. Surprisingly, I had a lot of fun doing that. Mostly
ERP
because
systems and fun don't typically go hand in hand.
Not at all. Account receivables, account payables, they're some of the most dreaded part of any businesses, sort of any organizations, record keeping. And one of the things that struck me there was the way that we actually built our supply chain system was what enabled Flipkart's continued success and growth. And the systems that we built there are still the blueprint, and they continue to operate today. And it was mostly actually the people that I learned a lot from. And that's where a startup bug sort of bit me. And fast forward to 2015, a lot of the early Flipkart folks were leaving, and I ended up going on my own startup journey, a founding journey, trying to build a fintech startup based on some technology that was specific to India that got launched. And the hard way that it's never a good idea to work forward from a technology and get excited about it and build around it. And there are things about AI that I think I learned that can be applied to AI that I learned back then, which is that you should always work backwards from the customer, right? And understand the problem, and whatever great technology you have at hand has to apply in that context. And after sort of chewing glass, looking into the abyss, for a year or two, I wanted to join Uber, which is where I met my co-founder, saw Uber go public, and then this was in 2019, and then a few months later the world shut down over the pandemic. The interesting thing about Uber's trajectory up until that point was, we are a rides business. Let's go make this business big and profitable. And Eats is sort of what we get by virtue of having all of these drivers in supply. And then when the pandemic happened, the world shut down. There were no rides. It was all Eats.
Mm-hmm.
And overnight, restaurants had one choice to make, which was get online or
Cease to exist.
At this point. And at this point, it was like nobody even knew what the or was, how long it was, when it's going to stop. Like the world just stalled, and it was just like do or die thing. Exactly, cease to exist. And restaurants came online instantly, and Uber pivoted its entire business model and entire teams to like basically focus on rides, get them up. Engineers were sitting down to transcribe menus and get restaurants online. The third dot that connected for me around this time was that I'm actually a restaurateur. And when I joined Uber back in 2017, I still had the startup bug. I was thinking about 100 different ideas. And the thing that seemed very obvious to me of all the things that I could actually build was a small restaurant. And yes, it was a very stupid idea, and I was made fun of adequately by my friends who are thinking of that idea. And my motivation was very simple. I really wanted to eat the kind of food that my grandmom makes. And I felt
Okay.
like I was not going to do it. And, my kids and the future generation are basically not going to get sort of that specific, South Indian vegetarian food made in a very specific way. And funnily enough, even though I was in India at this time, there weren't like commercialized versions of that recipe. So, I mean, it's a very classic food entrepreneur's dream, right? It's like, let me go build something I like,
Uh-huh.
something that for myself. So I built this and never actually thought anything big of it. I ended up starting it with my friends. It actually continues to operate till date, even today. And one of my closest friend is an operating partner, still operates it today. This is in Hyderabad, India. But back then, it was an experiment. It was a fun passion project. And guess what? Like, not only was it successful, it ended up becoming actually cash flow positive in like 6 months. We were actually starting to make money, and there was no genius behind it. The specific item or recipe wasn't like wasn't the future McDonald's. The simplest thing we did was we actually the only decision we made there was, let's basically make sure that everything we do is digital. So we basically had Swiggy and Zomato, taking orders. We basically had all of the payments come through, UPI, which is India's payment rails. We were spending $0 on software. Everything we did could actually come into an Excel sheet, and the business ended up becoming successful because of that. But at that time, this was pre-pandemic. For me, it was just like one instance of success, and I was happy about it. Never thought anything about it. But then when delivery happened, things changed. Everything changed.
Yeah.
Um, right. So that was sort of uh, you know, the origin or the backstory before we started Loop.
Yeah, so I think it's really funny because you've got really three of the components. You've got the accounting background, receivables, and understanding what a general ledger looks like from some of your early days, working at Uber and understanding how kind of the delivery model works, and then the fact that you've been a successful restaurateur. I guess give us a high level overview for people that didn't listen to the show when you came on the first time, because I think when you were on the first time, it was the first time I had actually even heard of Loop, and since then I've been kind of watching your journey, and I'm excited to dig into kind of where it's gone. But what does Loop do, and kind of your elevator pitch at a high level? What is Loop?
Loop AI is a delivery intelligence platform that helps restaurants have their delivery revenue profitable and growing. So we are basically a back office that's helping restaurants optimize their finances, marketing, and operations. And ultimately, the problem statement that we're going after is that for restaurants that want to go meet customers where they are, how
Mhm.
can we, as a restaurateur, engineer background, as people with a restaurant and engineering background, help them actually lean into it in a way where they don't feel like it's overwhelming or it's a necessary evil or any of the monikers that people apply to delivery over time, and actually see it as a future, as a good part of the future, and lean into it in a way where they basically use it as a superpower, right? To go acquire new customers, to go actually meet all of these younger audiences and grow with it without actually losing money on the flow through side. So we ended up building effectively a suite of products that optimizes the operations, finances, and marketing part of the business.
Yeah, and I think taking us back, 5 years ago, I mean, we're recording this in early 2026. 5, 6 years ago when kind of the pandemic hit. As you said, a lot of people jumped on these delivery platforms, but didn't necessarily make them a core piece of their business model. It was, I've got to do this because I can't, no longer have people coming into the dining room. Things have shut down because of the pandemic. They jumped on these delivery platforms, but they didn't architect, they didn't design it into their modeling, from their packaging to their food to their marketing to their delivery products, even their menu offerings, their pricing. All of those things were part of what people jumped into because they had to, as you stated, kind of in the early inception. But now we've had a little bit of time, a little bit of maturity. Obviously, there are a lot of brands that are just knocking it out of the park with delivery, but some are also still struggling. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about how and why you thought this was such a great piece of technology to help these brands, because to your point, there's a lot of people that, oh, it's a necessary evil, or I hate this delivery thing, or it's just taking volume from me, or it's taking money from me, or all of the different things that you continue to hear, and why I guess you were so contrarian with the solution that you had, because I, like you, recognize it's the future. And if you don't do it well, you're at a disadvantage to others. So I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about kind of the how and why before we jump into kind of what's changed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. If you allow me, I'll take the liberty to go back maybe even 100 years. right? Um, you know, I like to play around with as an intellectual debate with some of my friends and even restaurateurs who allow me to, where when they ask me why delivery is sort of this necessary evil or customers are being taken away, I ask them like, what's the alternative? What's the alternative thing that restaurants needed to do? And it's like, hey, customers should instead come to the drive-through, right? Or they should come and sit at the restaurant. Well, played back to the 1960s or 70s, the drive-through revolution when it was happening, guess what restaurants said? What the hell is drive-through? Why are
Yeah.
people eating in cars? They better come to the restaurants. And how about this? Back in the late 1980s, or sorry, back in the sorry, when the first wave of urbanization was happening and people were actually leaving small towns into cities, that fundamental economic migration, basically powered the need for packaged goods, Heinz ketchups and cereal, and so on and so forth. Kellogg actually came from that time. Guess what people were saying? They said, you know, be an agrarian economy, just go back to the farm, make your own food. Why do you want to eat like packaged food that's coming from elsewhere? So technology always feels that way. You know,
Mhm.
whenever there is a new thing that's happening, it always feels like, hey, why don't we just go back to the older ways and do it do it the way that it was supposed to be? And it's like you go long enough back, and it's like, what was the thing that was that was happening that wasn't supposed to be? And you can kind of feel the layers. The interesting thing that I always like remind people of is that if you look at drive-throughs, right, the reason drive-throughs came was because of an interstate system, because of the Eisenhower interstate system, where there were these large roads that were set up from, that enabled suburbia to come. There was this industrial revolution that was happening, and people were actually driving from long distances to like go to work and actually go places. Cars were growing, and drive-throughs and fast food sat exactly where it needed to in terms of giving people that fast calorie intake that enabled them to go into work. If you basically draw parallels to what's happening now, it's hiding in plain sight, right? The thing that happened was we had internet, we had mobile phones that came from internet, and most importantly, we had social networks. Social networks, not just in the form of like Facebook or TikTok, but also in terms of like group chats,
Yep.
WhatsApp, and just a plain old iMessage text chats, where there is so much social discovery that's happening, right? So just like the interstate system, we basically have these rails that are fundamentally driving consumers to go do what exactly? To do the same thing that they've been doing for the past 120, 200 years, which is opt in for convenience, right? Not go back to the kitchen or the farm, right? And make it very easy for them to get the meal so that they can go do whatever they like doing. And it's the same theme again, Jeremy, which is 200 years ago, trust me, we did not have Asian cuisine in the US, right?
Yeah.
Trust me, we did not even have burgers and pizzas before, like, 70 years. As time passed, we actually end up with more selection, right? Because when you actually allow for specialization of labor, when you actually allow for restaurants and all of these cuisines to come up, we actually live in a cuisine rich world. And for delivery marketplaces, for instance, selection is a very big criteria. And that's one of the things that um, a lot of restaurant brands wonder, hey, I have an amazing app. Why aren't they coming here? Because ultimately, a consumer only has 10 or 20 apps, and they're choosing the one that has 1,000 restaurants over, just one, everything else being equal. Assuming everything else is equal, your price, your convenience, so on and so forth. So I think the point here is that this is not like a today phenomena, or it is not
Yeah.
a US phenomena or New York phenomena. This is a global phenomenon. Same thing that's happening in China, India, Asia, South America is happening in the US. Consumers are actually going and opting in for this. And that has gone through a level of maturity today where it's $150 billion business. The same business was barely $5 billion, uh, you know, uh, 10 years ago. And it's a massive business, and it's growing at 20% year on year if you listen to the earnings reports from marketplaces, or what Olo is saying, or what any of the digital ordering platforms are saying. It's a global phenomenon. It's happening everywhere. Consumers are overwhelmingly choosing to get food from outside instead of on digital channels, instead of going back into the kitchen and cooking for themselves. That has effectively matured, and today we live in a world where brands are seeing 20-30% of their revenue and sort of pooling in and going into that $150 billion revenue pool that consumers have created, and dipping into it through marketplaces, through catering, through their own online channels, so on and so forth.
So tell me a little bit, and again, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Funny enough, I was on a conference call a week or two ago, and somebody's like, "Hang on just a second. My daughter is ordering from Chipotle on DoorDash, and I don't understand. And the daughter's like 12, but I think across the board, I was just having dinner with my brother and his fiance last night in New York, and they were sitting in a Thai restaurant, and they've been in the inside of the Thai restaurant one time before last night, but every other experience, and they ordered it from there twice a month, but they order it via takeout and via DoorDash, and the food shows up to their door. So across the board, that brand, had they not been on the marketplace or had they not given them the consumers the ability to do that, it would have precluded them. And there's 3 other Thai restaurants on that same block that they probably would have ordered from, based on both convenience and based on the fact that, they were in the mood for Thai food. And this place delivered. It was convenient. It was affordable in the price point that they needed it. And so all of those different things. So I agree with you. The reason for us to understand that, but now let's talk a little bit about what does Loop do to help? Because I think there's 2 sides of the Loop equation, and I think you guys have built more than what you had 2 years ago when we last talked. But let's talk a little bit about kind of, I guess, the plus side of what Loop does to manage and help restaurateurs that now recognize I have to be on this platform, but how do I do it well and in a way that I can make it profitable and not feel like I'm at the mercy of these large tech companies?
Absolutely. So what Loop does is it measure, protect, and grow as a framework. It applies that framework to delivery revenue. So measure is effectively, let's reconcile everything. Make sure that we are actually able to understand what our ratings are, what our operational issues are, what our errors are, and how our marketing is actually getting us, the marketing spend is actually giving us on the dollars. At the end of the day, the most important thing, and if there is one thing that the listeners take away from this session, is understand the flow through
Yeah.
of what delivery is offering. Contrary to everything that you hear, understanding the flow through from delivery is very straightforward. And just to double click on why I say that, delivery is the only revenue channel where you actually have fully attributed marketing spend, your entire cohorts of customers in terms of new or old, not a sample, not a 10, 20% sample that you might get from, a loyalty system or a digital ordering system. 100% of your customer base, you can actually like cohort them. How many of them, came back? What is the retention? How many of them have loyalty with marketplaces, so on and so forth? You can actually understand what feedback they left. If they have actually, let's say made a refund request, you can actually understand what the specific items were that were wrong. You can connect it with your, item prices, item costs, and understand what the costs was. You can understand what the labor impact was. You can actually look at a fully attributed model of how this channel is giving you a flow through fully.
So talk to me real quick about that. Sorry to cut you off, but I
Yeah.
want to, without something like Loop, how do they do that? Because it feels like that's almost overwhelming. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful to these platforms, but you've got 2 or 3 different delivery channels. And I know you guys aggregate it and make it so much simpler, but it feels like you're playing that old game at the carnival, whack-a-mole, where the mole pops its head up, you hit it here, and then you go to the next one and you go to the next one. I know you guys do a lot to aggregate that and help them, but is it even able to be done manually if I had somebody that was their full-time job or whatever without your guys' platform?
I have done this manually. Me, and I'm an engineer. I'm an analytical person. I love spreadsheets and Excel sheets. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to do it. It can be done, right? But but I think you're 100% right. It's very overwhelming. I'll talk shortly about what we do specifically there. But I think the thing that I want to bring focus to is that it can be done as
Mhm.
against your customer, your guest who actually comes into the store. You're not going to spend time asking every guest, did you read about us on a banner? What's the name of the person that told you? Let me go back and figure out how much cost I spent to like get this guest inside the door. None of that's actually even possible elsewhere. You can actually do it, but doing it is very cumbersome. Um,
Yeah.
the way that we actually make it super easy is we actually, with Loop, you can actually go live, with your entire platform in a week, where you can connect your delivery revenue, your digital ordering, your point of sale with your ERP systems. See the actual flow through numbers. Look at what happened in the past year across the different campaigns, different events that you had. And you can also project out what's going to happen in the next year, all within like 30 minutes. So all you have to do is like sit down and just look at this and get that understanding and control. So the key thing here is what you said about sort of understanding all of the complexity of these reports and really trying to look at what your flow through is very cumbersome. But I think you're actually doing injustice to that activity by saying,
Mhm.
by almost saying that it somehow existed before, right? Like it did not, right? Like nobody actually had, like, there is no part of the restaurant's revenue stream or marketing spend or sort of their flow through, or there isn't like a single revenue channel where they basically have a very clear flow through understanding, unless they just have one, which is like,
Yeah.
okay, customers, there is a model, sure, there is a store models, there is a theoretical number, but the actual breakdown by channel was not even feasible. So in a lot of ways, most restaurants are actually, they do, small and big, do not have the framework to actually do that kind of analysis because it does not exist anywhere else. So when you're actually doing it for the first time and trying to understand it across all of these tens and tens of reports across each of your single digital channel, it can become overwhelming really fast. And the hard thing about actually looking at those reports is for you to understand what's happening from a marketing standpoint and an operation standpoint, and then correlate it with what is the benchmark, what does it actually need to be, and what's the headroom. That process is going to take several weeks, if not months, to get to the bottom of. And that's basically what Loop is best, is magically offering instantly for you.
Well, and that I guess was my next line of questioning is this. So how do you guys serve up that data to be able to help them make better business decisions? Because we say it all the time on the show, tech for tech's sake is worthless, but tech that truly is going to drive guest experience and staff experience is where people need to be investing their time and money. And so I'm projecting, and I'll let you talk more about it, is you're gonna deliver back to them. You've got problems with operations. You've got problems with the packaging. You've got problems with the drivers, whatever it is. You've got problems with chargebacks. You've got problems in these areas to be able to deliver back operational goods to the restaurateur. You've got a pricing problem because your cogs are off.
Today's episode is brought to you by Restaurant Technologies Incorporated. They are the leaders in automated cooking oil management. And if you're not familiar with them, they've been on the show a few times to share some of the unique and cool things that they've been doing in the oil management space. They have an end-to-end closed-loop automated system that helps deliver, monitor, filter, collect, and recycle your cooking oil. Sounds like a lot. It's because they do a ton to help clean up one of the dirtiest jobs and most dangerous jobs in your kitchen. You can check them out by visiting rti-inc.com or by calling 888-779-5314. They've already helped over 45,000 customers in the United States with their cooking oil, so clearly they're doing something right. Now back to the episode.
So I'd love for you to talk through the different data elements that you guys are able to ascertain and give back to the operators so that they can make better business decisions, so that they can not only retain those clients, but get them to keep coming back.
Absolutely. We talk about this a lot with our Loop users, Jeremy. So fundamentally, Loop is not a dashboard, it's a workflow. So the high level overview of how we actually make this possible is basically three buckets. And I'll give you like a couple of examples in each of those. So with respect to accounting, the central thing there is taxes are very complex with marketplace, with withholdings, marketplace withholdings, all kinds of local tax regimes. And especially with price differences between point of sale versus what you're actually listing on the marketplaces, things can get really complex. And actually, what's the tax liability? And then you throw in like chargebacks, you throw in like marketing, food related promotions, etc. I can guarantee you that if you actually look at most restaurants like tax liability with respect to what they're paying versus what they need to pay, that they're all overpaying, right? And we
They're off.
have delivered like 5% of the entire revenue was like what a very popular brand was actually overpaying, and we helped reduce that. Not to call anybody specific out, it's not like a local problem, it's like it's true for everybody because that data hops through so many systems, your order aggregator, your point of sale, something that connects from that to your ERP and then your ERP system. And then by the time your controller or, your tax analyst looks at it, that data is like very hard to like get to get to sort of the source and really understand what's happening. So we help,
Can I
sort of
ask
size that
one
really
or
well.
make a clarifying statement real quick about taxes? Because I was just on the phone with a brand recently. My understanding, and I'd love for you to correct this and at least educate our listeners, is if a product is being delivered, you are to charge the tax rate where the product is being delivered to. If the third-party aggregator is using their pickup model, then it gets charged to the tax of where the restaurant brand is. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in addition, there is a lot of states where the marketplace itself does the tax deduction and remits it to the tax authorities on your behalf. So you shouldn't be paying taxes. for those.
Yep.
And in some states, the marketplaces have different treatments for it. So
Yep.
there's a lot of like very interesting things that. But I think it's one example. Tax is one example of how your delivery revenue being transformed and inputted into your ERP system as a journal entry can actually have an impact on your actual flow through, right? So the first thing we do is we get in there and we automatically send those journal entries into the ERP system. So we have integrations with every ERP system out there. Ultimately, what we're doing is we're pushing those and taking that work away from so many accountants that are actually spending weekends trying to understand this new report that came from the marketplace and trying to like sort of sit and transform it and put it in the ERP system. So, and by default, that addresses taxes, that addresses the royalty a piece of delivery revenue, that effectively helps the CFO understand how much did I actually spend in commissions versus marketing versus different aspects of that revenue very easily. So that we basically call as measure. And the second aspect of loop is protect, which is what you're basically saying. I want to quickly sort of talk about the operational issues that one might have with respect to delivery. So one of the big problems that brands have and marketplace have and consumers have, it's a lose for everybody, is if I basically order something on delivery, it won't come to me properly. Or the restaurant might say, oh, delivery is an area where I don't like the way my food gets presented to a customer. Or for marketplaces, trust me, like a lot of people don't see the marketplace angle here. Marketplaces hate chargebacks, hate downtime, hate canceled orders, and all of these things, fundamentally because it actually costs them a ton of money. In fact, for more than half of the issues that actually happen with both customers and they actually deal with, the drivers or delivery folks as well, they actually comp it automatically. And yet there are still all of these issues that the restaurants actually face as well. So it's a lose for everybody. Ultimately, there is, some of them could be fraudulent. Some of them could be actually restaurant attributed. One of the fundamental questions there is like, what is it that I can do as a restaurant operator to effectively make sure that the customer that I'm actually serving on these marketplaces, they get a great experience? And what am I overlooking? What can I actually like figure out in terms of the best experience? I'll give you a very simple example. One of the funny things that happened, this happened a few years ago now, very early on, is every customer that ordered this specific salad from a customer on Loop effectively would report that they were missing chicken in the salad. Um, and they had a very high error rate. They would request a chargeback. The restaurant was very angry because it's like, the customer's fraudulent. What do they mean? They need a chicken salad. There's not a chicken salad. Why are they expecting chicken? The marketplaces were like, your error rates are very high. So when we came in, the first thing we did was we looked at that error and we realized that it was like the systematic issue. And the issue was they actually had the wrong image on the marketplace menu where they basically had a chicken on it. And it's like, wait a second, like all we needed to do was like update it that represented the item and then it was instantly gone. Such a simple issue. Another really good example of this is there was a restaurant that basically turned off delivery channels right around Thanksgiving, came back, they did a reset, they forgot turning one marketplace on, and they basically turned it off for like months after that until Loop basically came in and they said, hey, why is this turned off? Because it turns out that they just did not even know that they weren't serving customers that are coming from the channel directly. It's like such a simple operational mistake. But that's what happens when you basically have 20 different channels and you have to maintain all of them. So another very simple example. And then, another third really, common mistake that happens a lot is the way that you design your menu in terms of modifiers can be very, very painful for the customers. They might basically say that, you have to add, let's say, side of fries for this entree, and the side of fries in the entree is just sort of listed at the bottom of a bunch of other modifiers, which are like smaller modifiers. And you don't see that you actually need to add one more, side of fries and add this other package next to sort of this entree. And that was one of, it's such a small printing sort of representation issue on the ticket. And this specific restaurant was seeing just so many issues come from that because every time they basically send it out, they were just missing a side of fries. So the operational issue there was like, hey, you're actually missing the fries on the line. And all you needed to do was like highlight that better and actually count the number of packages that leave the delivery counter. So another very simple example of like the kind of issue that can, all of these three, by the way, are issues that didn't exist before delivery was created.
Yep.
They're coming in today. They're new. The question is how operators work with it. And I'll just close with one sort of new product launch that we actually recently did. So, people often wonder, hey, what all of this AI hype is great. How is that actually helping me? Right. So a very good example of this is, we see so many store managers whenever we used to hop on calls with them before, or we would give them training. And a lot of them would actually take it on their cars. They would have a mount. They'd be sitting, they'd be driving, and they'd be like, okay, great. Keep, I'm comfortable doing this. Keep talking. And we're like, what are you doing? Like, that is so dangerous. This is not worth it. This training call is not worth it. So finally, we actually built out a voice app, which is, by the way, very easy to do. We're calling it Samantha. We're calling her Samantha. You can actually set up Loop in a way where she calls you on a Monday afternoon to give you a debrief of everything that happened last week, and you can talk to her, right? And she can
Oh,
respond to you
wow.
on all of the operational issues that had happened. So it's just such a simple solve where it's like you don't have to sit in front of a dashboard, speak of like actually delivering issues and operational issues to the last mile. The thing is, like, how do you actually get it to the hand of busy general managers? It's not just a PDF on your phone that you have to open while you're driving anymore. It's actually a call that you can get on, which is what all of the store managers do all the time. They're on calls all the time. So this is one of another sort of coworker, Samantha, who looked at your operational issues, and you can just talk to her, and that's the end of it.
Well, and that's one of the things that I love about what you guys are doing with Loop is because you guys, I mean, one, you're an operator at heart. You've operated restaurants. You get it. You also were in the accounting world, so you understand how painful it is to do the reconciliation of the taxes. And so, I love that you guys have got this. And this is not AI for AI's sake. This is AI to truly solve a business challenge. That business challenge was nobody was getting the data to make themselves better in the way that they needed to receive it. So now being able to talk to Samantha, as you've dubbed her, the ability to have that ongoing conversation is going to continue to solve that. I guess, where are things going on kind of the, in Loop's world? Where are you guys going? Where do you see it continuing to go? I could see a use for AI where it's now aggregating and benchmarking you against others, number one. And number two, if you continue to have the same problem and Samantha continues to recognize, hey, you continue to miss the dressing, now figuring out another way to alert. Those are two things that I guess if I were in a place that I was operating, I'd love to see. But I guess, where are you guys thinking this is going to go?
Yeah, great question. So we are all very excited for every new model launch. Every time a new LLM comes, it unlocks a ton of capabilities. One of the powerful capabilities that actually got launched from a recent model release is the ability to actually um, have a financial assistant as a CFO is working on their Excel sheets for all kinds of projections and hypothetical things for the future, but also pulling data from the past. So basically, what we launched is a product called Loop Quant. So it's basically an Excel sheet, but it basically has AI that you can type, your natural language questions to. It goes and pulls your data from your ERP system, your point of sale system, your third-party delivery, so on and so forth, and puts things together like compared my um, restaurants P&L with a public company's P&L, right? And you can
Yeah.
actually look at all of the top 10 public companies out there and actually benchmark against it. Or do things like help me project out what kind of store goals I can set for the entirety of next year. And you can actually sit and do that in plain text, with the AI going and applying all kinds of formulas, pulling data from your backend and doing all of those transformations in front of your own eyes. So in terms of where we are going, effectively, we are building a coworker, an agentic coworker, an AI coworker that can actually help simplify these things for you. It could be Quant, it could be Samantha. Another coworker we have is, a chatbot called Don Draper, where you can actually,
Don Draper,
yeah,
the
of Mad
marketing
Men
guy.
fame. Exactly. We actually have, so I was just looking through this. We had about 60, sessions just yesterday where all of our users were sitting down and sort of talking to Don Draper in terms of what are all the things that we could be doing. Do I need to invest in ads, promotions? What happened to this specific location on this specific day? The way that you would talk to sort of a marketing consultant or a marketing analyst. So one of the central things that AI is actually doing is simplifying natural language interfaces into extremely technical and complex aspects of data. So fundamentally two things that were impossible to do. Number one, a fully attributed, digitized version of every customer, every order, every single rating feedback, and actual flow through on every single order. That was impossible pre-delivery. That happened. So Loop is doing that. And now on top of that, you can actually go and have natural language conversations with it. You can actually build out Excel sheet models with it. You can actually go and literally talk to it over the phone. And I think that combination is effectively setting up our restaurant partners, Jeremy, for success in a way where not only are they meeting customers where they are in their own terms, actually setting up and setting up their brand for success by lapping 10-20% growth year on year on delivery, doing that profitably, and actually being excited about that revenue channel as a place where they're able to have the most amount of control. They're able to actually do the most amount of tests. They could actually hypothesize, what if I did this? What if I did that? In the regular, store, if you actually did a test, it'll take you weeks, if not months, before you understand like the flow through impact, all of the impact it has on marketing, so on and so forth. But you're able to actually do that, very easily on delivery and get a response in hours. At the end of the day, that's the core of what we want to do with Loop. We want to enable more cuisines and more restaurants to come. We want to see more and more brands that go from 10 locations to 100 to 1,000, and live in a world with more richer selection of food, but do that in a way that's profitable, that's growing, and that's relevant for the next decade of brand building for restaurants.
Well, and the thing I was really going to ask the question, and I think you answered it in that last response, which was really what's the impact? And you're seeing double-digit or more impact to people's bottom line in this channel. So the fact that you guys are, helping on, the cost saving side, you talked about taxes earlier, helping to drive. And the part that I love about it is win-win-win. It's the delivery companies are in a better place, the restaurateurs in a better place, and ultimately the consumers in a better place because you guys have been able to do all three. You really are matching all three of the constituents to make things better. Whereas in a disconnected world, you're just kind of fighting in as a restaurateur, you don't know what to do and you end up hurting yourself. So how do people get in touch? How do people what you said you can get somebody up so quickly? And, I guess you're the founder. I guess if you're saying it, then chances are it's going to happen. And I've talked to other customers that have done this, but a lot of people are like, there's no way he can get me up and going that quickly. I guess tell them where they should go. What is the experience going to look like if they were to hear this and go, I need this now?
Absolutely. So you can go to loopai.com right now, set up some time with us. We will get you onboarded as soon as a week, and depending on some complex setups in a couple of weeks. And you can effectively, at the minimum, get a sense of what your flow through on delivery is, and you can get a sense of how you benchmark against other brands. And my central takeaway here is that brands on Loop effectively saw 10% year on year growth, and their flow through on delivery in a lot of cases is actually higher than what it is for in store. But even in cases where people want to be aggressive, it's not was that 20%. So let's say you have 16% margin on your in-store revenue. You should have 12 to 14% on delivery, not worse. So don't listen to anything else. You can actually get to double-digit growth on delivery. You can actually do it in a way that's profitable for you. And if you want to find out how, just reach out to us on loopai.com and we'll get you set up, up and running.
I love it. Well, I'm grateful for what you guys have done. There's no other products out there that I've seen out in the market space that are really doing all of the things that you guys are doing. There's some that are kind of taking care of one slice of it or another slice of it, but I love that you guys have really pulled all of those things together. And it's I'm grateful that you guys have built it, and I'm a fan standing on the sideline cheering you guys on and excited. So thanks for coming on the show again. To our listeners, guys, you guys have got lots of choices, so thanks for hanging out today. If you guys have any other guests that you guys would want us to have on the show, please let us know. We were joking about the fact that you continue to run into people out at trade shows that have been on the show. So I love that. And it's always fun to deliver value back to our listeners who obviously are out there every day fighting the good fight to make things better. So thank you, Loop, for what you guys do, and make it a great day.
Thanks, Jeremy.